My Lords, I am indebted to the noble Lord who has already drawn attention to the Green Party's position on HS2. I'm sorry he's not now in his place and will be reading my comments later in response. He made it very clear that my noble friend Baroness Jones of Molscombe has made that position very clear to your Lordship's House, and that's a position that the Green Party has held since the start of this debate. So I would ask anyone who wants to try to use environmental arguments for HS2 to look at our position and our statement very loud and clear that HS2 is no solution to the climate emergency or our nature crisis. Now, I'm always aiming to be positive, so I guess I want to speak in favour of a rail project that's going ahead right now, a lovely, exciting rail project that is unfortunately in Sweden. But it does have impact potentially on all of your lordships and your travel, because it's the return of night trains, which it has been highlighted means you'll be able to get from Copenhagen in the middle of the evening to London for lunch by train. Now that's truly replacing flights with rail travel. And if we talk about using all of the capacity we now have on existing lines, well, there's one way in which we do potentially have more capacity, night trains. And indeed, when the Eurostar started, the plan was to have night trains, sleeper trains, to the continent, and that's something I'd very much like to see revived. But perhaps I should have begun by declaring an interest as a resident of Sheffield and as former Green Party leader. The number of train miles that I've completed in the last 7 or 8 years, I haven't kept count because I'm really glad I haven't kept count. But I can claim Lord Kerr referred to the noble Lord Kerr referred to the level of expertise in this House. I think I can claim expertise as a truly veteran, long-time train traveller. And I can also, should any of your lordships wish to know, tell you exactly where the pacers always leak when it's raining. The Green Party actually came out in opposition to HS2 in Spring Conference 2011. And I remember that debate. It was a long and heated debate because, understandably, people thought Green Party opposing trains. How can that be? But there's been lots of discussion in your Lordship's House about economic arguments, but I want to add one that I haven't heard yet, which is one of the key things we focused on back in 2011 was an economic and social argument about the fact that HS2 would focus people, money and resources even more on London than is already focused. And that is, I would argue, the last thing this country needs, and it's also the last thing that London needs. I know that the Mayor of London has expressed his support for HS2, and there's the great argument that many politicians feel the need to keep arguing for growth. And that's an argument we might perhaps have another time in your Lordship's House. But what London needs for itself is a healthy hinterland, a healthy north, as well as, of course, the north needs a healthy economy, a healthy society. And London is a primate city, everything's focused here, and that causes massive damage to everybody. What the Green Party has called HS2 is an utter waste, because what we should be spending on transport, we need massive spending on transport, but we need massive spending, as many of your lordships have already said, on other rail routes, particularly rail routes that run east-west. But also, and I haven't heard every speech, but I've heard nearly all of them in this debate, I've yet to hear the word buses used. But if we think about how most people need... Okay, I apologise, I may not have heard it. Most people get to work, most people get around, see their relatives, see their friends, combat loneliness, so many of the issues we're concerned about. Buses are crucial, and walking and cycling are crucial. And that's where the funding, the spending needs to go. I talked about my personal expertise. I refer to the Trans-Pennine so-called Express. And I think some of your lordships will be well aware of that. And also of the need for all of this to be integrated and fitted together. When I catch trains many parts of the continent, every carriage has an indicator board that tells you at the next station what the buses, live, real-time information about what bus connections you can make. It even sometimes tells you about where you can hire a bike. It tells you about ways in which you could have an integrated journey, and that's the kind of thing we should be spending money on. Now, there's been some discussion about, oh, this is not either or. Well, I'd refer your lordships to a lot of the discussion we've had about the difficulty of our capacity in managing projects, our capacity to have the labour, the skills, the knowledge. We have problems with planning capacity. Now, this is issues that may come up in another debate on your lordship's house in the immigration bill when that arrives, but we undoubtedly have a huge problem. So saying we can just build some more projects and build some more projects isn't just a question of the availability of money, it's also the availability of skills. Now, I said this isn't an answer to the nature crisis. Actually, I feel like a lot of these arguments have been made already, very notably by the noble lady sitting beside me and by Lord Randall, the noble lord opposite. There is huge damage to the environment from this plan for HS2. And one of the arguments that HS2 and its proponents have put forward is to say, well, they're going to do biodiversity offsetting. Well, my lords, in the earlier debate on fisheries, we were discussing how incredibly nature depleted Britain is as a country. We have lost so much. As the noble lady said, 2% of ancient woodlands left. We simply cannot afford to lose any more. And the idea that you can plant some trees and that's a replacement, an offset for an ancient woodland, simply does not stack up. Now, coming to the arguments that people make suggesting it will help with the climate emergency. Several other noble lords have pointed out that it will not replace flights. Actually, what we'll hear from regional airports along the route is how much of a boost to them to increase their capacity, increase their flights HS2 will be. Now, the fact that having declared a climate emergency, we should still anywhere be talking about airport expansion really doesn't add up, but HS2 adds to airport expansion, it exists it. And I notice also that, as I acknowledged before, I haven't heard every single contribution, but I've heard most of them. I noticed that no one has even mentioned that, oh, we might be going to get to Edinburgh and Glasgow one day with HS2. And that's where the argument started, that's where the replacement flights were going to come. Well, I'd also refer your lordships to the issues of timing. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change told us we have 10 years to turn things around. In 10 years, we might have got to Birmingham with HS2. It's nothing like the time frame that we need. Now, the nature of the damage, the environmental damage being done, is when I started this, having arguments about HS2, people were saying it's all about the speed, we've got to have the speed, it's designed for speed. Now it's designed for capacity, we hear. If we were going to simply go for capacity, we wouldn't have the environmental destruction, and that's something I think the committee report we're debating here covers. Now, I'm being pointed at for time, but I'm just going to make one small final point, because a lot of our lordships are referred to how we make decisions, how we deliver infrastructure in the UK. And I sometimes say that if you invite me to come and talk about algae, I'll bring up the issue of democracy. And I'm going to bring up the issue of the structure of our governance now, because first-past-the-post politics produces really bad decision-making. It produces decision-making aimed at winning seats in particular places. And we're indebted to a member of this House who isn't here today. Your lordships might like to look it up. Lord Mandelson told the FT in 2013 about the political reasons why the decision was made. So, my lords, I'll finish with a simple statement. Don't go for greenwash, which the arguments being made for HS2 are. Let's go for the local and regional cross-country, non-London focused transport improvements that we need to have. That's what we need to choose.
My Lords, as a former member of